As Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Bava Metzia Daf Lamed Tes, and we're starting from Daf Lamed Ches Lamed Beis. About when the lines get wide, about 5 lines from the top, where the lines get wide. So very apropos and current events, so to speak. Unfortunately, this Gemara is timed with what's going on in the world in Israel. The Gemara is discussing over here, Itmar, we learned the teaching, Shavui Shenishba, somebody was taken captive. Someone was taken as a hostage, okay? And let's say he had one son. He was taken as a hostage. So can you, and if now nobody's taking care of his field. So we don't know how long he's never going to be held hostage. So what's the halacha? Can we now allow his only son to take over? Let's say it's his only son to take over his field, at least to guard it and to start taking care of the field. So Rav says, Ein maridin karav l'nechasav. We don't allow his relative to take over his possessions. He's only in hostage. He's not dead yet. Shmuel says, maridin karav l'nechasav. You are allowed to have his relatives take over his possession. Again, we're going to say his kid take over his possession. So the Gemara says like this: if you heard that he died, right? We don't have to aid him that he died, right? But it's just a rumor. You read in the paper somewhere, CNN quoted, got a source that he's dead. So kuli alma pligi. Once you heard that news item, everybody agrees the maridin that you allow his relative to take over his properties. We can assume that the rumor is true that he's dead. Ki pligi, when is the argument between Rav and Shmuel whether we allow the son to take over the property? B'shaloi shama boy shemes. You did not hear that he died. So Rav says, Ein maridin. We don't allow him to go into the property. Dilma, because maybe mafsid lahu, he's going to destroy the property. Why? Why would he destroy the property? So Rashi explains, because he's not going to take care of it because he knows that maybe my father's going to come back and it's not going to be my land. So he's not going to put his heart and soul into keeping up the property. So therefore, he could even do more damage than good. So we don't allow him to take over the property. Shmuel says, Maridim, we do allow him. Why? Because even though it's possible the father's going to come back, because we didn't even hear that he died. Kaven the Omamar, since we learned later on. In other words, since we're going to learn later on that no matter what happens, he does get paid out from the profits, like sharecropper. He gets like a sharecropper. He'll get 25% of the profits. So, or 40% of the profit, depends, 50%, depends what a normal sharecropper gets. So therefore, he's not going to destroy the land. He's going to put his heart in it because he does have a financial interest in taking care of the properties, even though it could be that the person will come back alive and take back his properties. Meisvei, so it's a machlekes between Rav and Shmuel whether the relative can take over the properties. So Meisvei, we asked the question from Abraisa. Reb Laza says, that one of the curses that it says in the Chumash is God said, I'm going to get so angry with you, I'm going to kill you. And the Torah tells us, now that I'm going to kill you, your wife is going to be an almana, a widow, and your kids are going to be orphans. So once Hashem says, I'm going to kill you, I know that your wife is going to be an almana, a widow, and your kids are going to be Yisayim. So why does the Torah tell you that extra words? Talmud Bavli, why does the Torah say that? It's going to teach you that there's a double curse over here. Not only is Hashem going to kill you, but we're not going to know that you're dead, and we're not going to know that you're taken into captivity. Your wives are going to want to get married, but we're not going to let them because we don't know for sure that you're dead. Writes him later, and your kids want to take over your property. We're not going to let them because we don't know for sure that you're dead. So we see from this brisa that if we don't know for sure the guy is dead, then we don't allow his children to take over the property. And so therefore, it's a kasha on Shmuel. Shmuel says, Marid and Karev l'nichseyav, we allow his relative to take over. Answers the Gemara, you're right. We do allow a relative to take over. We do allow the son to take over. But what the Brisa means to say, Amarava later linkar tanam, to go down and sell the property, that we don't allow. In other words, we allow the son to take over the property and guard the property and work the property and eventually take the profits of the property if the father comes back. But we don't allow him the right to totally own the property to sell it. Avdu Uvda ben Ardoi was a story like similar in Ardoi. And the question was, can we allow the relative to take over the property? Somebody was taken as a hostage. Upashte Rav Shesha, Rav Pesach, Paskim Hamas Nisim, from this price so that you don't allow the person to take over the property. Amalei Rav Amram says, from that brisa, Dilma Leirad Limkar Tanat. Maybe the brisa is only saying we don't allow the relative to go sell the property. We don't allow the person to take over the property and sell it, but we would allow him to work the property. So Rav Amram was questioning Rav Shesh's psak that he didn't allow the relative to take any ownership or any interest in the property or executive position in the property. Amalei, so Rav Shesha says, I'm correct. Dilma me Pumbedisa an. You must be from Pumbedisa, Mr. Rav Amram. The ma'aylim pila bekupe demachta. That, can bring an elephant through the eye of a needle. In other words, you think of these stretch terutzim to answer a brisa. But really, that's not the way that you learn the brisa. The brisa is definitive that you never allow a relative to go into the property as long as you don't know for sure they're dead. Why? The brisa compares kids taking over the property to the wives being able to marry. Mahasam, just like the wife, she's never allowed to marry unless you know for sure the husband died. Klauloi. Avhochanami, so also over here, we will not allow the children to go in to take over the property of the parent. Even as long as we don't know the parent is dead, we don't allow him to take over the property. So that is the machlekes. Says the Gemara that this could be a machlekes tanoim. We learned it. It's machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Actually, it's a machlekes tanoim. A reading karav l'nichsei shavi tanoihi, to allow the relative, and we're going to use the son to take over his father's property, who was taken as a hostage, is a machlekes tanoim. It's really a machlekes tanayin. The tanayin we learned in the brayta. Hayer the nichsei shavi. Someone goes down to somebody who was taken into as a hostage. Right? He takes over the possessions of the person that was taken over as a hostage. Ein Metzia ois biyadai. We don't. If he went on his own without going to Bezdin, he just said, my relative, let's say my father is now in captivity and I'm taking over here. We don't kick him out. Not only that, let's say you've heard that his father survived and he's on his way home, and started eating up the fruits. We let him keep it because even though what right did he have? He heard the news report that his father is now on his way home. Nevertheless, if he ate up the produce of the property, we let him keep it. But what are we talking about? What does it mean? Somebody who's taken into as a hostage. If your dad or your brother or anybody who you would inherit, they went to another country again, and they got into jail in that country. And then you heard they died, and that's the key over here. You heard that they actually died, so therefore, then you're allowed to go into the property. And even if you heard on the news, you opened the television, you saw that he's on his way home, you can still eat the fruits of the property as if it's your own until he actually walks in through the door. But another case is if you go to the possessions of somebody who is abandoned the field. Let's call he abandoned the field. Or deserted the field. Let's call it deserted the field. Then you kick him out. I mean, just because an owner deserted the field doesn't mean he allows anybody to take over it. What does it mean you deserted the field? They went to another country, but you never heard that they died. We don't know if they went into jail or captivity. You don't know what happened to them. So then you cannot go into their field. So you can't go into their field. That's it. Let it be deserted. Shimon Galil argues, Shemati Shenetushim Kishvuyim, that somebody who is Netushim, that he deserted a field, that's as if it's like he was, we know for sure that he was taken hostage. In other words, that you are allowed to have the relative take over the property. So right over here, the Machlokes Tanoim, which aligns itself with Machlokes Tanoim of Rav and Shmuel. Whereas the Tanakama will hold that even though you didn't hear the guy died, you're not allowed to go into his field. And Rav Shimon Gamliel holds, despite not hearing him that he died, you're allowed to have the son take over the field. And that is the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Yored l'nichsi retushim. Now the Gemara talks about what happens if a guy abandoned a field, right? He just abandoned the field. We didn't even hear that he went to Medina Siyam. All of a sudden you wake up the next day and then nobody's living next door. So, and you walked into the property and you want to take it over. We kick you out. What's called ritushim, that a guy abandoned the field. He didn't just desert the field, he abandoned the field. If your father, brother, or anyone who you can inherit, and all of a sudden you wake up one morning, you don't know where they went. They didn't even give any indication that they're going on a business trip. So therefore, then for sure, everybody says that if you walk into that field and you want to take it over, we kick you out. Why? Because if they had intention that you should take over the field, they would have had sense to give instructions. The fact that they did not give instructions means they don't want anybody to take over. So the Gemara says like this: What's the difference between the word nitushim, which means deserted, and what's the difference between ritushim, which it means abandoned? So we go to Daf Lamed Tesam Aleph. Nitushim means bal korcha. The guy ran away against his will. That's the word nitushim. In other words, Medina Siyam. Let's say he had to living, right? So he went to Medina Siyam, and we don't know what happened to him, right? We didn't hear that he died. So that means it's against his will that he's not coming home and that he left. That's the word nitushim, a guy who deserts his field against his will, the bal korcha. Where do you see the word nitushim means against your will? The pasuk says, "V'had shviyis tishmetenu untashta," that on Shemitah you should desert your field and not even plant or do anything to benefit your field. Afka also the malka, the king kicked you out. So it's against your will not to have anything to do with this field. So nitushim means you desert the field against your will. Ritushim, the word ritushim means the medatam. You did it on your own. You walked out, you abandoned, you wanted to disappear. The ksiv aim albanim ritusha. Rashi brings a whole drasha that means that you left on your own volition, and we don't know where you went. So that's retusha. So if the person really wanted somebody to take over his field, then he would have given instructions. The fact that he left and nobody knows where he went, so therefore that is enough. That is called retusha, and therefore we don't allow any relative to take over his field. Tana, we learned in the Brisa, the kulin shama lehenka aris, but we pay the guy back as if if the guy worked the field when the person was taken into captivity, and so we pay him back when the profits of the field, we give him like a percentage of the profits of the field as if he was a sharecropper when the owner of the field finally returned home. So that was the Brisa says. Ahaya, what case is the Brisa talking about? If we know that the guy was taken as hostage and we heard that he died, right? And then he came back, right? We tell you that even if you heard that he's coming back and you eat the field, you eat the produce because you have a right to go into that field because you heard that he died. So certainly whatever you invested into that field, you're going to certainly get back as a sharecropper. In other words, after the guy shows up, you still have a financial interest in that field because the reason why you went into that field to take over that place because you heard he was taken as a hostage. You heard he died, so you had every right to work that field and invest in that field. So, and of course, you're the next in line to inherit. So therefore, of course, you're going to get like an oris, so that the Brisa does not have to tell me that. Ella aratushim. It's talking about that the guy was deserted his field against his will. We don't know that he died. But the Brisa says that if you do that, ratushim means the guy abandoned his field on his own volition. And so therefore, and you went into the field and invested in the field, what do you mean? You had no right to do that. So we'll kick you out of the field. So we're not going to give you a percentage of the profits when he comes back. Alanatushin, the in-between case. The guy left. We don't know that he died. And he left against his will. So therefore, when he comes back and you forced to leave the field, the guy who came in and took over the field is forced to leave, we'll pay him back as if he was a percentage owner of the field as a sharecropper. Now, who is that? Ilema L'Rabbanan, Amr Metzia, nice miyadid. Rabbanan say you kick him out. You have no right to go into the field in the first place. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, but if you're going to go according to Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, Ha'amar Shemati Shenetushim Kishvuyim. He held that Netushin is like Shvuyim. Just like Shvuyim, when you heard the guy died, you have every right to be in that field. And Netushim, even if you did not hear that he died, you have every right to be in that field. So certainly you're going to get as a sharecropper. So it doesn't. What is the novelty of the Brisa saying, "Oh, you're going to get paid back as a sharecropper"? Of course, you're going to get paid back. You had every right to walk into that field and start, investing at that field. Answers the Gemara, a Netushim field. Again, a Netushim field. A guy left on a business trip, and we don't know what happened to him, and we assume that he got held up, but we didn't hear that he died. So you have a right. A relative has a right to take over that field, but kishvuyim below shvuyim. He's like. You have you have a right to take over the field as if he was taken into as a hostage and dead, but not exactly. Kishvuyin, you have a right to go into that field like somebody was taken into captivity. They might see we'll not kick you out. But you're not exactly like somebody who we heard that he died. Over there, if let's say you walked into somebody else's field, right? And the reason why you walked into somebody else's field is because you heard he died in captivity. So then, even if you hear that he's on his way home, you're allowed to eat the produce. You're allowed to eat the produce, and whatever you eat is yours until he walks in through the door. But if you did not hear that he died, yes, you had a right to take over his field, but you had no. Once you hear that he's on his way home, you have to stop whatever you're doing, and therefore, in that case, so how are you going to get paid back for your investment in the field? They're not going to kick you out. They're not going to say, okay, you had no right to do it. We'll pay you back. You'll get a percentage of the field as if you're a sharecropper when the final accounting is done after the season. Says the Gemara, a question. Not Maishna Mohadatnan. Why is this any different in a Mishnah? A man has his wife brought in a field, right? So the husband, before he divorced her, invested into the field and then ate some of the produce, right? So when he divorces her, everything stops. The season is over. And let's say he put in money, he's not going to get paid back for that investment. Because whatever he ate, whatever he invested, he's invested, and that's it. The story is over. And over here, in our case, we say, no, the story is not over. The Yairish who took over the field of the person who was taken into captivity, although we didn't hear that he died, after the season is over, when the guy came back, you get paid back for your investment. Why is it different than a man investing into his wife's field? Answers the Gemara, because that's expected. You invest into your wife's field. Over here, it's a little more similar, to if you invest in your wife's field, who's not really your wife. If you invest into your wife, who is a ketana. Now, how do you marry a girl that's under bas mitzvah? It means it was a kedushin derabanan where the brother and the mother married her off to you. So really, she's not your wife, because in 2 seconds she could walk out of the marriage by doing miyun. So if you invest in that property, it's kamoitzi al nichse achadam. It's like investing in somebody else's property, and therefore you invest into that property with permission. But if something stops the whole thing, let's say she made miyun, she said, I don't want to be married anymore, you'll still get your investment back. Alma kevin deloy samche daita. Since he is not relying to stay for a long time, with Rabbanan made that so that you don't lose out, we'll pay you back your investment as a sharecropper. Also over here, you don't know if the guy died. You're going into the field based on him being taken hostage, and there's a good chance that he's not coming back. Rabbanan made a rule that if he does come back, you're going to get your investment back. That you shouldn't lose out, so therefore you get paid back as a sharecropper. The kulin shaman lehen ka'aris, we pay you back as a sharecropper. Kula tuya mai, what does that include? Tuya hada amrem. Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel Shavish Nishba Maridin Karvden Chasav. If a person went into captivity, yes, then we bring the relative to take over the field, right? Yatsa the das, but if he went on his own volition, a Maridin Karvden Chasav. The relative has no right to go into his possession. So if a guy wakes up one morning and finds that his father just abandoned a field, and we don't know what happened to his father, he can't go in, he can't take over the field. You have to first establish that where your father is at, because maybe he's still alive and doesn't want you to take over the field. But Rab Nachman, Rab Nachman says, let's say you heard your father Bayreach, he had to run away. He wasn't taken into captivity, but he had to run away for whatever reason. Then we assume that it's as if he was arrested, and it's the same idea that as if he was taken into captivity. So the Gemara says, Bayreach machmas mai. Why would a person go on the lam? What's the reason? That we say it's as if he was arrested. If he left because he didn't pay his taxes, there's nothing wrong with that. That's almost like he left on his volition, his own rights. He planned this whole thing to run away, and therefore, if he had all the smarts to plan his escape, and he didn't give instructions what to do with his field, obviously he's planning to come back. So he doesn't want his son to take over his field while he's gone. So that can't be what Bayreach is like, as if you were arrested. Bayreach machas meradim. A guy ran away because he killed somebody. Oh, if you killed somebody, so now you didn't have time to plan your escape. So therefore, once you left, we allow your son to take over your field. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, Shavu shenishba b'niyach kama liktzar. A guy who was arrested, okay, he was taken hostage, and he left his field to cut anavim lifsa, grapes to cut, tamarim ligdar, or dates to reap, zeis and limsek, to cut the olives off his tree. So Bezdin Yardin Nechasum Amidin Apitrafis. First, Bezdin appoints an adult, not a relative, and they take over the field. The kites of a voice of a goydemaiser. They finish up the season by harvesting all the fruits of his field. Once the season is over, and then afterwards, Maridin Karv the Nechasov, they bring a relative to his field to take over. First, they right away assign, a Bezdin appointed person to take the field, and then they give it over to the relative. So Gemara asks the question: if Bezdin assign somebody, let's let the Bezdin assign somebody to take over the field forever until he comes back. Why do we get the relative involved? Answers the Gemara, and the reason why we don't want to get a relative involved, it's obvious, because once you put a relative in, he may not want to leave when the guy comes back. So the answer is, we don't put a appointed person from Bezdin for a person who's old person. In other words, most people are doing this for free. So if you're dealing with your Simon orphans, so people like to take a power of attorney over orphans' estates because they feel they're doing a mitzvah, and there's a time limit. Here, we don't know when this guy's coming back, so therefore, Bezdin initially hires somebody or tells somebody to do it for free, but eventually they want the relative to take over that field of a person who is a shavui shenishba, a guy who was arrested and taken into as a hostage. Amar Rav Huna said, "Ein maridin kotchen l'nichsei shavi." Let's say the father was taken as a hostage, and the only son that he has is somebody under bar mitzvah. We don't let him take over the field. And the opposite is also true. If you have a katan, a guy under bar mitzvah has possessions, we don't let his relative take over that field. And we don't let a relative of a relative take over that katan's field, even though they're not related to the katan, but they're related to the relative. Let's say the katan is A, and B is a relative. B shares the same father as A, so B is like a brother of A. Then C, who shares the same mother with B, but is not related to A, cannot take over the property of that katan A, who's under bar mitzvah. So the Gemara explains like this: we don't let let's say a son under bar mitzvah take over his father's possessions. Why? Maybe he's going to destroy it. He doesn't know how to run a field. And not any relative, even a relative of a relative to a nexei katan. Since once you allow people to take advantage of a katan, and you say, "Oh, this field belongs to a katan, so we'll let the relative take over," then when the katan grows up, he's not going to be able to take it back because the other guy's going to say, "Wait a second, it's mine. I inherited. I paid you for the property," and the katan is not going to know how to fight back and say, "No, wait a second, you only took it over because I was a katan and I couldn't take care of the property." Amar Rava, Rava said, Shmami no Rav Huna. We hear from Rav Huna, Ein machzikim b'nechsei katan. There's no such a thing of a chazaka with the possessions of a katan. We go to Amar Beis, Vafili Higdal, even if he gets older. In other words, normally a person could claim ownership of a property if he lived there 3 years and nobody made a lawsuit against him. However, if a stranger took over a property of a katan, then even if he stayed there 3 years, we don't give him the property, because we could always say that the reason why the katan didn't fight back, because he didn't know how to fight back. He was a katan. And even if the guy started taking over and taking care of the property while the katan was a katan, and then 3 years after the katan turned into a gadol, let's say he's 16, still we don't allow we don't allow this situation to happen. There's no such thing of chazaka that works for a person who took over a property of a katan. And because if Rav Huna held that we do a chazaka, so why don't we let a stranger take over a nichsei katan? Maybe when the katan is going to grow older, the stranger is going to say, it's mine, and you sold it to me. So therefore, that's not a fair, because unless there's a contract, we're not going to give it to that person, and we're going to give the property back to the young person. This was not said, this was only by the brothers of the father. But if the brothers, if they're related by the mother, there's no problem, because the father, a relative of the father, can take over the katans and say, oh, I inherited the field. But a brother from the mother, he will never basically mess over the katan by claiming the field is his. We don't let a brother of the father take over the field. El ba'arsuf, you're dealing with property. Avabate, to take over a house, to watch the house on behalf of the katan, less than ba. Because if it indeed turned into if the guy's going to say, the brother's going to say, oh, the katan sold me, everybody knows if it's true or not. And therefore, they're not going to allow that to happen. This is only by property. If you didn't do if there wasn't a star that announced how much the Yerusha was, if there was a announcement of what the Yerusha is, then of course there's no problem with having, because in other words, there's no chance that this person who took over the property of the katan will mess over the katan, because we have our defenses up. But the Gemara says, not true. It's never true. It doesn't matter if it's the brother of the katan from the father's side or the brother from the mother's side. It doesn't matter if the property, if it's real estate, or if it's a house belonging to the katan. If there was not an itida or not itida, it doesn't matter if there's a star. In other words, we don't allow a relative or anything who's related to the person to take over and watch a property on behalf of a katan. Because again, once it's a relative in there, the katan is, he's going to feel heimish with the katan. And when the katan grows older, this relative is going to say, oh, it's my property, and you have no right to take it back. So therefore, it's only when a katan has property and he can't watch it, we'll only appoint a stranger, somebody not related to the katan, to care for the property until the katan grows older. Okay, we're going to end here a little bit by the story of Ahisafta by this old lady, and we'll do that tomorrow, Bez Hashem. Okay.